Shot pouches are another one of those pieces of 18th century material culture that are pretty difficult to nail down. There are very few remaining documented original examples to go from. So we have to go from paintings and other people's interpretations to try to get a good idea of what commonalities of shot pouches would have been. Today on the Deerskin Diary, I'm going to walk you through my shot pouch and what I carry in it, so stick around. There's bound to be something in here that you can carry with you. Now, I see shot pouches mentioned from some of my favorite 18th century authors and journalists that I like to draw from. People like Nicholas Creswell and Daniel Trabue, to name a couple. And we're going to use their accounts to talk about some things I think we can derive about shot pouches. They don't describe them necessarily in the detail that we would like in the 21st century, but they do reveal small clues. Now, Creswell reveals perhaps a little bit about the weight of a shot pouch when he uses it in comparison to the amount of meat that he carries back from a hunting trip. I believe I have exerted myself more than I can bear. It's judged by the company that I brought between 70 and 80 pounds of meat, exclusive of my gun and shot pouch. To add to my distress, my shoe soles came off, and I was obliged to walk barefoot for 6 miles. Now, that Creswell quote's really interesting to me because he's equating the amount of meat that he's carrying back to camp with his shot pouch on some level, right? So he's saying basically my shot pouch, which is also heavy, added to the additional weight of this, 70 to 80 pounds of meat that I carried. And that tells me a little bit, potentially, about the weight of his particular shot pouch. Now, I have to imagine it has things like lead, maybe that a ball mold or something like that in there, but he seems to, at least in his mind, think that his shot pouch is pretty heavy. Daniel Trabue talks about one shot pouch that he purchased after they had taken it off of a dead native warrior. We sold the Indian plunder in the fort on Monday at Vandu, and it fetched 50 shillings for each man. I bought some of this plunder, some nice wampum, and a shot bag and powder horn, etc. Now, I'm intrigued by the Trabue quote because it not only reveals the removal of personal effects by the victor from the dead enemy fighter. Now, what we don't know is whether or not this was a trophy, a memento, something that he actually did use and then discard when it was past its normal life. Was it something he sold later on and traded? Trabue doesn't mention it, but it is fascinating to me that the blending of two cultures and what it might have meant to someone or others on the frontier. And that's not something that's always easily documentable, but I do think it's very revealing in the sense that obviously that kind of stuff was going on. Now, turning back to Creswell, on Wednesday, April 16th of 1777, he describes another example of a Euro-American in possession of a native-style shot pouch. This morning I have had my chest searched for treasonable papers by a certain Mr. Stanhope and Ensign McIntyre, by order of the committee, or more properly the Court of Inquisition. These scoundrels have plundered me of a shot pouch and powder horn which Captain White Eyes, an Indian chief, gave me, a bear's skin blanket, and several other articles of no very great value to me, though I am very unwilling to part with them. But perhaps the best account of a shot pouch and its contents comes from slightly after our time period of the 1700s. This one actually comes in about 1810. It's from John James Audubon. We have to be a little careful with a quote like this because, as you'll see, it has a twinge of the Romanticism of the American frontier beginning to work its way into the description. And I personally believe it is because that is at a time in American history where we are beginning to, as Americans, romanticize the American frontier. Our descriptions, our prose are a direct reflection of our country's search for our own type of mythology, for example, this frontier that only exists in North America. But there are very valuable clues that we can gain from Audubon's description. He blows through his rifle to ascertain that it is clear, examines his flint, and thrusts a feather into the touch hole. To a leathern bag swung at his side is attached a powder horn. His sheath knife is there also. Below hangs a narrow strip of homespun linen. He takes from his bag a bullet, pulls with his teeth the wooden stopper from his powder horn, lays the ball on one hand, and with the other pours the powder upon it until it is just over top. Raising the horn to his mouth, he again closes it with the stopper and restores it to its place. He introduces the powder into the tube, springs the box of his gun, greases the patch over with some melted tallow or damps it, then places it on the honeycombed muzzle of his piece. The bullet is placed on the patch over the bore and pressed with the handle of the knife, which now trims the edge of the linen. The elastic hickory rod, held with both hands, smoothly pushes the ball to its bed. Once, twice, thrice has it rebounded. The rifle leaps as if it were into the hunter's arms. The feather is drawn from the touch hole, and the powder fills the pan, which is closed. "Now I'm ready," cries the woodsman. His companions say the same. Hardly more than a minute has elapsed. All right, so I've done this the way that the Audubon quote describes, and I want to see how close I am to my normal 60 grain powder charge, which is going to be in this antler powder measure here. So let me get the ball out of there a second and find something to do with it. Now, as a quick side note here for safety, if you haven't done this much before and you just really have no idea how much powder you've poured into your hand, I absolutely recommend always using a powder measure. If you're too short on the powder charge, it's not going to be a huge deal, but if you're too heavy on the powder charge, it can actually be pretty dangerous. Now let's see how close I am to this 60 grain powder measure here. No camera tricks, no turning off the camera and editing, just pure raw history reproduced. Let's see what we got. Okay, I'm just a tad short on the powder measure. Not by much though. That's probably about 50 grains, maybe a little even less than 50 grains. But I mean, for eyeballing it, that's not the worst idea in the world. As a quick public safety message, I'll tell you that if you put two shot pouches together, eventually you're gonna have a house full of them. Well, my name is Anthony and I have a shot pouch problem. I think that's pretty clear. These things seem to be like so many other aspects of the living history hobby. You can never have too many. I want to go over some of the commonalities of the shot pouches that I either look for or incorporate if I'm purchasing or making one on my own. Now, the first thing I'll say is I'm a firm believer that simple is best, right? In the absence of information about original 18th century shot pouches, I feel like while we can't necessarily reproduce an exact replica, with at least one exception that I'll go over in a minute, we should always be looking for different commonalities that we can incorporate, knowing that the finished product is likely more of an amalgam of an original than a replica of an original itself. So one of the simplest shot pouches I have right here is this one. I use this actually very frequently. It is just simply brain tan buckskin. I made this one myself. It's got a rounded bottom here, flat across the top, a single pocket. There's nothing internal, there's no divider or anything in there, and a very simple button closure, and I decorated the flap with a little bit of fringe. I really like this one because it's so simple, and like any good piece of equipment, when I'm not using it, I really don't even know it's there. Now, this next pouch I want to show you is this hair-on deerskin pouch. And this one was made by Dave Cifuentes, and I really think these hair-on pouches are really cool. Hair's on the front but not on the back, and if you notice, this pouch is symmetrical. It looks professionally made, and that's one of the things that I want to encourage folks to do, is if you do decide to make or purchase a pouch that has the hair still on it, you would still want to likely make something or find something that is professionally done, right? In other words, some of the pouches that we see today that are made of an old flour sack from the antique shop, and it has a raccoon face or a skunk face for a flap. There's really not a lot that I personally have found that I can historically reference or document in that particular style of making. So I would rather get a hair-on pouch like this one that, again, is professionally made. It's a professionally made shape, and it follows commonalities of hair-on pouches from the 18th century drawings or paintings, or even in the early 19th century. This next pouch that I'll show you is one that I made myself. This is a brain tan deerskin pouch. It has a red wool strap, and it's based off of a painting of a Cherokee from from the early part of the 18th century. And it's a D-shaped bag. You can see kind of like the letter D here. So it's got a round bottom to it. I put a button on the front. Buttons seem to be fairly common additions, and I like to know that the things in my pouch are going to stay in my pouch. And this one, most importantly, I think I've mentioned in another video before, this one is made from a deer that I killed with a rifle that will eventually go to my daughter. So she will get a flintlock rifle, a pouch made from a deer that I killed with the gun and tanned the hide, and a powder horn as a set. And I encourage everybody to find something like that to do. It just really, I think, adds a whole nother depth to the historical experience. Now, this is another pouch that I made myself, and here's the sort of so what of this particular pouch. This is a reproduction of a pouch that is in the Wallace Gustler collection, but I had never handled it and only used pictures on the internet and pictures of other people's reproduction pouches to try to replicate it as best as I could. Now I'm going to show you another one here in just a second that is also based on the same pouch, and you'll see the differences. But this was a very fun project to do. I had to thin the leather down pretty drastically, really work on my stitching, which is not terrible, but it's not, you know, exactly artisan quality either, as you might say. Dyed it with vinegaroon, which is vinegar, and I used steel wool and a jar, and then dyed it with that, and then oiled the pouch. There is a divider inside this pouch. On the strap, I have a cherry wood powder measure that a friend of mine made for me, as well as a vent pick hanging from these brain tan strings, and then a strip of cotton muslin that I use for patching material in that 54 caliber gun a lot. So I love this pouch because I made it. It was a lot of fun making it. Again, it was another connection to the piece itself. But as I found out later, not as good of a reproduction as it could have been. This pouch is a relatively new acquisition for me here. It was made by Alex over at Frontier Trading Company, and I encourage you to check out not only his YouTube channel, I'm sure most of you have already seen it. If you haven't, check it out. And he also has a website where he's been working on creating some objects, you know, making some things, or providing you an opportunity to make some things as well. And this is actually a reproduction of the same pouch in the Wallace Gustler collection. But Alex had handled the pouch and taken notes, and it is my opinion that it doesn't get any closer to that particular pouch than this one here. This pouch is very professionally made. I think that's a commonality. There probably were a number of homemade type pouches, but I don't know how long they would have lasted, and they certainly don't seem to have stood the test of time, you know, 250-ish years later. This is the one that I use predominantly now. On the back, there is a button adjustment, so I can actually adjust the length of the strap using this button. And I find that very important because in the wintertime, when I put more layers over the top, it's important for me to be able to adjust the length of that strap so I'm not completely hemmed in, or I can't get the strap over my head. It just becomes much less useful in that manner. Again, from the strap here, I've got hanging my antler powder measure, and that's about 60 grains of 2F powder, which is what I use in my flintlock. And I've got a double-sided vent pick, and this particular idea came from a museum collection in what's called the Jakewith pouch, and I'll try to put a link in the description to the article that talked about that. Now, going over the contents of my shot pouch, what I have here is a ball mold or bag mold. This is simply a bullet mold. Here, this one's in .530 caliber, made by Larry Callahan, and it goes with the rifle that you see me carrying in most of the videos. And I prefer to keep that bag mold in the shot pouch because it is the correct caliber, and as long as I have little pieces of lead, if I recover bullets from an animal or something like that, I can melt them back down and make a bullet out of them again, as long as I have that bullet mold. I also have these two standard cleaning style attachments. This is a standard ball puller here, and this is a standard worm style patch puller or cleaning jig. These are also made by Larry Callahan. They simply screw onto the end of the ramrod. I have one of these small spring style worms here. I'm still getting used to using this. It was made by a friend. It attaches by friction onto the end of a ramrod, and you can use it for cleaning or for obviously removing a stuck patch or something like that. I will tell you, I'm really bad about getting things stuck down in a muzzleloader barrel. I just force it too much and wind up with trouble on the other side of that. I carry extra bullets. I've got 2 different sizes here. Most of these are the 5.30, and then I have 1 or 2 extra smaller bullets here. Bullet amounts vary. Sometimes I have a bunch, sometimes I don't. I carry a small whetstone here as well as a small pocket knife. I think it's really important to keep a cutting tool close by and a way to keep that and other cutting tools sharp. I also have here a small tin oiler. This is filled with bear oil that was given to me by a friend, and I prefer to use bear oil on the gun wherever possible. If I don't use bear oil though, I will use sweet oil, which is also today known as olive oil. Now I also have a small turn screw, which is 18th century parlance for a screwdriver, as well as 4 extra flints. These 3 are British style flints, and this one is a local chert that I nabbed myself. This just happens to be cotton muslin. It is what my gun likes the most. So I carry extra. Total weight of this shot pouch is 1.85 pounds, and that's give or take, how many different bullets that I have in the bag, etc. Total weight with my large powder horn is 3.8 pounds. The powder horn itself comes in at 1.95 pounds. So we're looking at 3.8 pounds total weight on the shoulder when the powder horn is full and when I have this particular loadout in this shot pouch. So I think something important to discuss also is what I don't carry in my shot pouch. Things like a flint wallet, for example. A flint wallet is a piece of leather. It has some individual pockets stitched in it for your individual flints. It helps protect them. But I found no historical basis for that in my particular time period, so I leave them out. I simply wrap the flints up in an old piece of cloth or some extra patching material. Another item that I don't carry with me in my shot pouch is a fire kit, because I feel like if I keep my flint supply fresh, then I always have a flint and steel kit if I have my rifle. Well, that's a wrap for me on shot pouches, the evolution of the pouches that I have and what I carry inside of them, and the historical basis for why. As always, I'm truly humbled by the support and positivity that comes from making these videos. I hope I've given you something that you can carry with you. And until then, we'll see you next time on the Deerskin Diary. That's a wrap.